conversations, as awkward as it can be, but it's great that everybody's participating and taking their lunch breaks to try to at least stay in tune and see what's going on. But the good news is, at least our industry, and I work with Randy at CRE Consultants, so I can say our industry, we're considered essential. So we've been working through it and putting our if we want to say it, our health at risk for the betterment of the community. But that's been good news for the economy and for our livelihoods as well, being able to serve everybody. But yeah, so we're in unprecedented times. It was an interesting, 2020 has been an interesting year. We started the legislative session the second week of January, and we ended mid-March, towards the end of March, when this was starting to come to a head. So we were in our chambers, the House and the Senate, debating bills when we saw the first death here in Lee County, which was one of the first 2 or 3 in the state. And then that week, moving forward, turned out to be the week where we realized what we were dealing with, and CDC started asking people to self-quarantine, and we had to quarantine a few members of the House and the Senate, lock down the chamber, get screened every day we went in. So it was interesting being a part of that, and then coming home to really being, out of the fire into the frying pan, if you will, or out of the frying pan into the fire, and having to go to what we're dealing with in our communities. But as far as bills we pass, I'll start there and talk about the state of things right now. I've been in constant communication with the governor's office, with DBPR, Department of Economic Opportunity, where unemployment's been a big issue, and I have to talk about what we're hearing there. But as far as bills we passed, look, we got our work done, I was grateful that we were able to do as things were starting to happen on a worldwide level with COVID-19. But we passed a balanced budget, $93 billion, which is a lot of money. But what's happening there is the state's growing, and I think it will continue to grow. But we are seeing, at least until COVID hit, we were seeing 1,000 new people to Florida every single day. That's not only because Florida is a beautiful place to live, work, retire, raise a family, go boating, you name it, but it's because we have a great tax structure. We have no income tax. People are leaving tax and spend states, and they're coming to Florida. New York is slightly smaller than us. And as far as population wise, they were the 3rd largest. We were the 4th largest. We beat them at the last census, but we're still kind of neck and neck around 21 million people. However, their budget is twice the size of ours. We're spending $93 billion a year. They're spending twice as much. So that goes to show you that Florida is being fiscally responsible. We're not raising taxes, we're cutting taxes. So as more people come here, we're able to use that tax, that increased tax base, that wider tax base, to fund needs such as education, infrastructure, and public safety, but we're not increasing the burden on each individual. In fact, we're asking them to put less into the system. So that's what Florida's been doing. And the main things I mentioned that we look to are education, public safety, and infrastructure. Unfortunately, healthcare is the biggest thing that we actually do put money into. And that's a lot of that's the hospital systems and our 50-50 share of Medicaid with the national government, the federal government. So we've been trying to wean ourselves off of that through free market reform across the board, but especially in healthcare. Last session, we got rid of certificate of need for hospitals. As much as we all love Lee Health, Larry Antonucci, all of them are doing a wonderful job. They have a monopoly. So that is now a thing of the past, and others can come in and compete with them. And obviously that's not something we really want to highlight right now, as they're out there working every day and making sure that our community is being served. They're doing a wonderful job, but that's the realities of government monopolies. And so we're moving forward with things like that to make sure that our healthcare costs come down, access increases, and quality stays the same, if not better. Telehealth is something else that we passed, which is being heavily utilized right now. People that are going to the ER right now, they're going in because of real emergencies or because of COVID. Beyond that, people are trying to avoid the hospital. So that's been a real thing, and we're seeing that, economic effect. But what people are able to do, rather than having to go put themselves at risk at the doctor's office or the hospital, is they can get on telehealth. You can go visit your doctor like we're doing right now and have them answer questions. And if you need to have a follow-up with a physical meeting, then you can decide at that point if that's necessary. But that's going to substantially decrease costs and increase access. So that's a wonderful thing that we've been pursuing. Some of the bills that we did pass this year, well, let me talk a few more about some of the funding initiatives. While we were able to decrease tax burden, we had an increased tax base. We were able to fund infrastructure more thoroughly. $690 million is going towards Everglades restoration and water quality. That's more than we spent last year, which was $687 million. So in the past 2 years, we did over $1.2 billion towards Everglades restoration. We know how important water quality is for all of us here. It's the lifeblood of our economy. People come here to Southwest Florida for the beauty, for the environment, for the water. So we're putting our money where our mouth is and making sure that we're funding that infrastructure and making sure that the water that's coming out of Lake Okeechobee is clean. And if it's not, that we're cleaning it and sending it where it needs to go so that we can continue to have a great economy here. Teacher pay, we funded that at $500 million. I know any parents that might be on right now probably can attest that teachers deserve a pay raise, having to do all the online learning right now. So we're hopeful that that stays in place. Sadowski Fund, we fully funded the Sadowski Fund. Finally, that's something I've been advocating for my 8 years. So I'm proud that on my 8th and final year, we got it done. We came out of the recession and the legislature started looking into taking from these trust funds. And that was finally something we put to rest this past year so that affordable housing can be tapped into. So those, I think, were 3 really big things we were able to fund this year. And the unfortunate reality is we don't know if that budget's going to stay in place. So while we got out in March and we were actually wondering, do we need to put this budget on hold and come back? We decided let's pass what we've worked on and then make that decision later if it's necessary. So at least we have something to stand on. But the reality we have right now is the budget we passed a year ago in 2019 was for the fiscal year in 2019-2020. The fiscal year starts on July 1st. So the budget we passed a year ago is the budget we're in right now, and that's based on projections. And that's based on sales tax revenue, the seasons that we have, tourists coming down. And we had this happen during the heaviest tourism season in Florida. So we are going to be looking at a very strong holes in our budget for the 2019-2020 fiscal year, not to mention the budget we just passed for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. Good news is we have $4 billion in reserves. That's something that not many states can say. We are one of, I think, a dozen states that have a triple A bond rating because of our our reserves, because we have low debt, and because we have a great economy, that is $1 trillion economy. If you measure that on other countries, we're about 17th in the world. So Florida's been doing a great job with that. So the good news is, while we're dealing with this COVID crisis, the governor's been able to tap into those reserves. Obviously, we hate to see that happen because we need those reserves for a rainy day in the future, but a rainy day is now. But once we start tapping into those, we've got to wonder, how do we plug that hole and how do we rebuild those reserves? So there is discussion now of, do we come back for a special session, let's say in June, before the new fiscal year kicks in, not only to plug holes in the reserves that are being drained now for this current fiscal year, but to redo the budget we just passed for the next fiscal year. And that means everything's back on the table. That means the environmental funding, the teacher pay, the Sadowski Fund, you name it, all back on the table. And I hate to say that because we got a lot of good work done, but that's the crisis we're living in now. And what I want to point to too is, look, I think the governor and the president are doing a wonderful job guiding us in an unprecedented crisis, and something that no one could have ever prepared for, no matter how much preparation we had on the table. This is something no one could have ever prepared for. And they're doing a great job with the cards that have been dealt to them. I don't think any of us wanted to see a shutdown. I, for one, advocated against it, but obviously the health crisis came first. The president and the governor had to decide, and I think their hands were tied. But before the shutdown even happened, you had a lot of people clamoring for a shutdown. And what happens is, now all these things that the community tends to look to through public service, public safety, healthcare, you name it, those are reserves that we now, or funds that we no longer will be able to look to help with the community. So with the revenue coming short, the taxpayer dollars coming short, sales tax aren't being spent, people aren't out spending money, doc stamps aren't as high as they were. We've got to look to real meaningful cuts, and that's going to affect everybody in their everyday lives. And that's the unfortunate reality. The good news is, I do believe Florida is a strong economy, and it can bounce back with good people like the people on this call, entrepreneurs, people that know how to build a business and move forward. I believe that once this is in our rearview mirror and we start moving forward, people that are in these states that continue to stay locked down, that are looking to a June open when we're here in early May opening, the minute they get a chance to get out of there, they're going to come to Florida because they see what's happening down here. And that's not only because we got a good governor, a good response to this, a good tax environment, but there's some science that's saying that warm weather and humidity is good for the virus. And that's not a secret. I think any of us that may have ever had a cold, you go to the beach and have some salt water and some fresh air, there's something to it. So I think Florida's going to bounce back nicely, but we are going to have to answer for the economic shutdown, I think, for years to come, whether that's on a worldwide level, a national level, or a state level. But I think Florida's in a good position to bounce back from that. Some of the bills we passed, there was an impact fee bill that we did get passed this year. And a lot of times at the state level, we look to, what we call the bad actors, the counties and the cities out there that are running amok on people's liberties. Lee County, I think, has always done a great job with our county commissioners, and thanks to people on here who support good county commissioners, make sure we get good people elected. But we passed a bill that would at least say that if a county is looking to increase impact fees, they cannot increase them retroactively. So we've actually seen counties, and Volusia is one of them, where if you're a builder and you applied for impact fees, that application sitting on the table, then they go and increase their impact fees. They're coming back to you and saying, hey, that's more than you applied for. You got to go back to the homeowner now and ask them to pay more. I mean, that's ridiculous. So that's something that we got done. Sadowski Act, I mentioned we fully funded that. Rights of nature, I don't know if a lot of you have heard about this, but this is something that's starting to come to a head where you've got some environmental activists out there. And look, I'd love to think we're all environmentalists, right? But some of these environmentalists really take it to the next level and put trees above people. It's people first. And they're giving rights to rivers, lakes, and streams, rights that would traditionally be reserved for human beings, and groups being able to come out and sue on behalf of a river because of, you name it, God knows what. So we put something in statute that says, no way, rights are reserved to people, not to inanimate objects. So that was something that we got done. As we got home and started looking to the COVID crisis and what was happening, I worked very closely with the Florida home builders and ABC at the statewide level to make sure that we, this group, this industry, was included in essential services. We were successfully able to do that, and that was easy because the governor gets it. He was able to do that. Something I'm working on currently is 60-day permit extensions. We have that currently in statute that says that if there is a natural disaster, if there's permits on the tables, they're going to automatically be extended 60 days rather than having people having to go back and reapply for them. There is some ambiguity in that law as to whether a pandemic is a natural disaster, so we've got to address that more thoroughly, but that's something we're looking to right now. Those are just a few of the notes I had here, but rather than me talk this whole time, I want to hear what's on everybody's mind and have an organic discussion. So I'm all ears.
Yes, thank you. If you, I think because we have so many people on, if you have a question, if you shoot it through the chat, group chat, and we can get those, have State Representative Eagle answer those. So if anybody has any questions, then we have one. What are your thoughts on the need for the Visit Florida program?
Great question. So that's something that's been coming up year after year. And Visit Florida is what was intended initially to be a public-private program to market Florida. And that came under fire in 2017 initially, that and Enterprise Florida. And the idea there is you have some very strong libertarian to strong conservatives that look at what is the #1 duty of government. And as I mentioned before, as the majority leader leading the 73 House Republicans, we look to less government, free market reform, things like that. And when we're investing in Florida's future, we look at education, infrastructure, and public safety. That's all great if you're talking about a black and white world, but there's a lot of gray area there. So where does Visit Florida fall into that? And I'd say that's definitely a gray area when you're trying to be a strong conservative and lean on those credentials. And Enterprise Florida as well. So Enterprise Florida, when we brought Hertz here, which I think was wonderful for our economy, but if you look at the fairness of that, should government be in the place of picking winners and losers? Should we be handing out $1 million check to Hertz to come to Florida so they can compete with Avis and Enterprise and all these other companies? We're literally taking their tax dollars that they're paying to us in Florida and handing it to their competitor. So that was a real concern for liberty-minded free market thinking. And you can extend that to Visit Florida to a degree as well. So in 2017, we saw taking taxpayer money and giving it to Pitbull. We gave him $1 million to do a music video. He's already doing music videos promoting Florida. Do we need to give him $1 million in taxpayer money? We took, I think, $15 million and gave it to Emeril Lagasse to do a cooking show. We gave a bunch of money to another guy to do a fishing show. So what we saw there is, as the economy was growing, we put more money into Visit Florida. They were just spending it frivolously, something a lot of you and your businesses would never do. So we had to rein them in and put some accountability and some transparency into their system, and we did. But there were still others that were calling for, is this necessary? I, as a Southwest Floridian, feel that there is some necessity to Visit Florida. How it's funded is still up for question, and we did fund it this year. But if you look to Southwest Florida and you look to how dependent our economy and our livelihood is on tourism. And while we're also very much susceptible to hurricanes and blue-green algae and now COVID, I think that there is a responsibility for government to step in and promote what we have here. So I advocated for it. The speaker was a good friend, and I work under his leadership. Was very much against renewing Visit Florida, but he saw that there were a lot of people that supported it, and he did allow that to live on. So Visit Florida will continue, but I do think that there needs to be heavy eyes on it to make sure that it's accountable, it's transparent, it's not wasting money.
Thank you. Anybody have any other questions? This is a shy bunch, Dane, I tell you.
I bet.
Let's see. Is there anything new emerging related to gun safety and school safety?
Good question. So we, in 2018, after the Parkland massacre, we passed the MSD law, and there were some great things in there and some things of concern. But the main thing in that was allowing teachers to be able to protect and defend themselves. So we have what we call gun-free zones in our state and in our country, which I think are oxymoronic. Look, we as a country say you have the right to protect and defend yourselves. Unless you're a teacher, you're on school ground, then you don't have that right. But don't worry, we'll protect you. That's crazy because we've seen what happens, and no, government cannot protect everybody at any given time. And we saw that at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. We had 17 people massacred. 3 of them were teachers or instructors. One of them was a coach who the Guardian program is named after, Aaron Feist. He didn't have his weapon on him that day because he was a law-abiding citizen and followed the law of the land, which said he couldn't. And instead, he had to use his body to protect himself and others, and he was gunned down. So in that bill, we included the ability for teachers to be able to protect and arm themselves. And everything in that bill, by the way, President Trump ended up supporting. And we came back and reissued some of those things, making sure that the Guardian program was extended further. So not just coaches could carry weapons, but actual teachers. And look, these are individuals that, by the way, we're not forcing anyone to carry a weapon. We're saying if you would like to, you've got to go through a program that is about 132 hours, I believe, of intense training through the sheriff's office that any other law enforcement officer would have to go through to show that you are capable of carrying a weapon. You know how to use it. You know how to use it in an active shooter scenario. You know how to protect yourself and others. You know how to use it safely. So we're not talking about teachers just walking around with big guns. We're talking about teachers being able to conceal carry as they would any other time. So we didn't touch that again this year, but I think that there is continued push to make sure that people have the opportunity to protect themselves. School hardening is in place, making sure that we have the funding necessary to make sure that schools are safe and secure. And we'll continue to look at that and make sure we do so as we advance forward.
Thank you. I did have somebody had texted me. I guess I didn't want to chat, but somebody was asking, I know there's hurricane seasons around the corner, and with COVID and lockdown, even though those things we're sort of opening back up, has there been any discussion on sort of what the state's going to do, or how help local governments determine these shelters and how that, if we have a hurricane hit, what would the impact be, and would people have to stay home, or how are they going to handle that?
That's a great question. And as I said, I've been in touch with the governor's office or one of his agencies or someone on his staff on a daily basis. And what I can tell you is, while they are considering all scenarios and looking to the future, I mean, they are really looking at the data daily. So, I'm glad we're in phase 1 of reopen. What I can tell you is, I mean, the decision to issue phase 1 happened, I'd say, days before phase 1 was in place. While they had the mechanisms and the ideas to do so, they weren't going to do it unless the data supported it. I can tell you, I think that they're looking to do phase 2 in the very near future. However, if the data turns and it doesn't allow it, they're not going to do it. So that just kind of gives you an idea that we really are on a daily basis type scenario where we're making active decisions. So while hurricane season is around the corner, it really gets active August, September, and let's hope that by that time we are in a much different scenario where we can actively decide what needs to be done and how we handle it. Well, I'm confident the governor's office and DEM, Jared Moskowitz, who's the director of DEM, who I served with in the House, I'm confident that they're addressing those issues. I haven't had that conversation with them directly, and I'd be happy to do so, but I can imagine it's going to be, look, we've got, option A, where we would move forward if things were normal, and option B, where we move forward if COVID is still attacking us. And yeah, there would be some real issues there if we had to send everybody to they couldn't be in their home. They're in zone A, which needs to be evacuated, and move on from there. So that could be an issue.
Thank you. Any other questions? Come on. Well, while I'm waiting on questions, I want to make a little commercial. Next week, next Wednesday, Lee County Commission Chairman Brian Hammond will be our lunch guest. So mark your calendars. We'll be sending out some information on that. So Lee County Commission Chairman Brian Hammond will be on next Wednesday, and we look forward to hearing from him on the local level. So anybody have any? I mean, we don't have to. We scheduled to be on here, 45 minutes to an hour. We don't. Everybody can get back to work, but we want to, appreciate Representative Eagle coming on here. Anybody have any questions?
Phil, can you hear me? It's Steve Hilfiker.
Yes. Hey, Steve.
Hey, thanks for putting this together. I was just wondering, I joined late. I was having some audio issues. Anyway, if this has already been discussed, you can just give me the summary version. But as of now, the federal government has not provided the state any funding to assist with COVID, as I understand it. And I believe they're going to have to call a special session in order for the governor to tweak and finalize the final budget for Florida's budget this year. Is any word out on a special session or funding to the states?
Good question. We discussed that briefly, but there's more in depth I can get on that. So that is a good question. So yes, we're currently there's two issues. I don't know when you tuned in, but the one is that we are still in the 2019-2020 budget, right, which was passed a year ago, and there's holes in that budget now because of the expectations of revenue we were going to have as a state didn't come through, and then the budget we just passed in March takes effect July 1. And we expect, obviously we hope the economy starts bouncing back by the end of the year. By July 1, I would still imagine that there's going to be those expectations that we had anticipated will not be there. So the good news is we put in the budget we just passed $60 million directly related to COVID response. Now that money's been spent already, well above that, unfortunately, but that's the reality. But we also put $4 billion in reserves, so the governor's been able to tap into that. So while that's prudent of us and I think fiscally responsible, now that the reserves are being drained, that gives concern for the next rainy day that could be right around the corner. Who knows how long this lasts? Who knows if we've got a hurricane coming? So yes, we are currently having those discussions. I have a weekly conference call with the Speaker of the House and the leadership team, myself as Majority Leader and him. We've got about a dozen others, or a dozen total House members that we do a weekly call to discuss and assess the data where we're headed next. We are looking at the revenue the state receives each month. So the April numbers should be coming out any day now that we're here in early May. And then we'll look to early June what we've seen for May. And then we will decide at that point whether we need to go up in June for a special session. And it would likely need to be before July 1, before the fiscal year kicks in. But the other side of that scenario is reserves are being tapped into. The governor hasn't signed the next budget. He can line item veto a lot of things to save money, and then we leave it for the next legislative session. So there are still options on the table. The feds are working on money coming down to the state. I think there has been some, but they are still looking at doing more. So that's another option. I hate to spend federal money, but yes, we're in unprecedented times right now. So we've got to look to fill gaps, that's for sure, but we do have options on the table.
Okay, well, I'm in Tallahassee a lot. A lot of you probably don't know me as well. I'm here locally in Fort Myers, but most of our work is more on a statewide basis. I'm the chairman, or I'm on the board of the Florida Groundwater Association, Florida Brownfields, which gets into a lot of what the building industry does. And can assist with the lobbyists that we have with those groups if you need assistance in any of those areas, I'd be happy to help. Play
Great.
whatever role I can play. I've also got connections with the Florida Bankers Association that may be able to help us. But keep me posted. Phil, I'm in directly next door to Phil, so Phil and I can
I'll just
stay in
scream
touch
through
on
the
that.
wall. I'll just scream through the wall if I need
Yeah.
to. Mr. Mercer, I see you had your hand up. Would you like to share something or you have a question?
I have about 2 minutes. My sister-in-law lives in New York City. She runs a very large national fund for children's education called childrenscholarshiPfund.org. It was started by Ted Forrestman of Forrest and Little before he passed, and the Walton family before several of them. John Walton specifically, it was his pet project, still going strong nationwide, helping children get a good pre-education so they can go on to college with a huge graduation rate. It's a really interesting thing. She's been down here since February 25th. She has a condo here. She's been working and running her fund in New York City from here. I can tell you she's laying plans right now to move the entire organization down here so that she only has to go back to New York City for certain fundraising exercises, and moving the whole team down here. Her biggest problem right now is that she can't get any information out of her apartment to file her tax returns, but we're trying to figure out how to get that. There are going to be many firms that are going to get the heck out of Dodge. It's going to be incumbent upon the state, more so on the local communities, to redevelop the economic incentive programs now that they've been perfected. The same programs that brought Hertz in and some of the bad actors that didn't work so well. But we are going to have a massive influx, I believe, within the next 12 to 24 months of businesses, and they do not want to end up in the counties that are still closed. They prefer the west coast of Florida. So we're working with our local officials to get them accustomed to that idea. I would suggest that on the state level, we find a way to dig in and make those incentives possible, because they will be coming to Florida, and I believe we will be receiving a significant benefit from those inbound businesses all up and down the East Coast, New Jersey, Boston, New York, Midwest metropolis. They're coming down. So we need to be ready for them so that we can help them relocate.
I love it. I love it. That's exactly it. People are going to be coming to Florida, and that's real time. So thanks for sharing that, Randy. Good.
I'm going to have to drop off for my my 12:30 call, but I appreciate everybody who's joined us today. It's been very informative, and if we can help anybody in any way, even our competitors, we're happy to do so. So thank you for the invitation.
No, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Mr.
You're very welcome.
Well, do we have any other questions? Well, Rose Eagle, thank you so much for being on. I know I will be remiss if I didn't mention you're running for the 9th Congressional District, I think 19th Congressional District, for to represent us in DC, and the National Home Builders Association has endorsed you. So congratulations on that, and good luck with your race. And thank you for all you've done in Florida to support our industry at the legislature. I know for many years since you've been there, you've really been a good supporter of the building and construction industry, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, I carried the building, what we call the building code year for bills, and when we fixed some of that a few years ago and haven't had to be as heavy-handed every year, so that's wonderful. But thank you to all of you for participating. If you've got further questions, feel free to reach out. Philip, I'm sure, can share my contact information, but my staff's been working in my entire 8 years. They've been working more in the past 2 months, answering questions and emails from concerned constituents, just people out there trying to cut red tape or just get answers. So that's what we're here to do, and I appreciate the time. So thank you. And
thank you very much. And we'll see everybody next Wednesday at 12 o'clock. Lee County Commission Chairman Brian Hamm will be on. So we hope everybody will join us next week. And if you need anything from the association standpoint, we are all working. You can shoot us an email, give us a call. We're here to help you guys. If you need anything, please reach out to us. We'll do our best to help you. So thank you very much.
Great. See y'all. Thank you.
Thanks very much.